Everything looked normal. But if everything was normal, then why did the truth need to be hidden?
She smiled every morning, cooked breakfast, lived a normal life. But what was she so afraid to say out loud?
How long are we going to keep pretending?
What else do you want me to do?
I'm
I
trying.
can't do this
I'm
alone.
leaving. I'm done.
Morning arrived quietly, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Soft golden light slipped through the kitchen window, settling gently across the marble counter where everything sat in perfect order. The house looked untouched by chaos, untouched by pain, just another peaceful suburban home waking up to another ordinary day. She stood at the stove, flipping an omelet with careful precision. Her movements were practiced, almost mechanical. A faint smile rested on her lips, the kind that seemed rehearsed rather than felt. From a distance, she looked like any other wife beginning her day. Calm, composed, normal. But up close, the details told a different story. Her hands trembled ever so slightly as she reached for the salt. Not enough for someone to immediately notice, but enough to make the grains spill unevenly across the pan. She paused, staring at the mess longer than necessary, her breath catching in her throat before she quickly wiped it away. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. Tick, tick, tick. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway for just a second, sharp, alert, almost fearful, before she forced herself to look away. She adjusted her posture, straightened her shoulders, and continued plating the breakfast as if nothing had happened. Toast, eggs, coffee, everything perfectly arranged. From outside, across the narrow street, a neighbor watered his plants, casually glancing toward the house. He had seen her every morning like this, always early, always quiet. But today something felt off. Maybe it was the way she froze for a moment too long, or the way she looked over her shoulder when she thought no one was watching. He frowned slightly, then shook his head. People have bad days, he thought. It's nothing. Inside, she carried the tray to the dining table. The chair across from her remained empty. She placed the plate down carefully, aligning it with the edge of the table, as if perfection mattered more than anything else. Her smile returned, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. She sat down slowly, wrapping her fingers around the warm coffee mug. The heat should have comforted her. Instead, it made her grip tighten, her knuckles turning pale. Then, a sound, faint, almost unnoticeable, coming from down the hallway. Her entire body went still. The air shifted. The silence thickened. She didn't turn immediately. Instead, she stared straight ahead, her breathing shallow, controlled, like someone trying not to be heard. The ticking clock seemed louder now, echoing through the walls. Tick, tick, tick. Finally, she stood. Slowly, carefully. Each step toward the hallway felt heavier than the last. The light didn't reach as far here, leaving parts of the corridor swallowed in shadow. And at the very end, a door. Closed. Locked. She stopped several feet away from it. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Her hand lifted halfway, trembling in the air, before she pulled it back as if burned by an invisible force. Whatever was behind that door, she wanted nothing to do with it. Her eyes filled with something deeper than fear, something closer to knowing. And without another second, she turned around, walking back toward the kitchen as if the door and everything connected to it didn't exist. But it did, and it wasn't going to stay hidden for long. The house returned to silence, but it was no longer the peaceful kind. It was heavy, watchful, like something unseen had settled into the walls. She moved through the kitchen again, slower now, forcing her hands to stay steady as she cleared the untouched plate from the table. The chair across from her remained empty, but not for long. Outside, the world saw him differently. To everyone else, he was the kind of man people trusted without question. At work, his colleagues admired his discipline, his calm authority, the way he handled pressure without ever raising his voice. He was reliable, polite, the man who stayed late to help others, the one who remembered birthdays, the one who smiled just enough to seem warm, but never enough to reveal too much. Honestly, he's perfect, one coworker had once said, laughing lightly. I don't think I've ever seen him lose control. And that was true. He never lost control. He managed it. Carefully. Precisely. Back inside the house, the front door clicked open. Her entire body stiffened before she could stop herself. Footsteps followed, measured, unhurried. He entered like he always did, placing his keys in the exact same spot, his shoes aligned neatly by the wall. There was something deliberate about everything he did, as if every movement had been practiced 1,000 times. Morning, he said. His voice was calm, even, perfectly normal. She turned, forcing a small smile onto her face. You're early. Meeting got canceled. He glanced briefly at the table, noticing the cleared plate, the absence of any sign that breakfast had been shared. His eyes lingered for just a second too long before returning to her. You ate already? He asked. Yes, she replied quickly. I wasn't that hungry. A pause. Not long, but long enough. He nodded slowly, stepping closer. You should still eat properly. It's important. The words sounded caring, but something underneath them wasn't. She lowered her gaze, avoiding his eyes. I will. He studied her face, his expression unreadable. Then his attention shifted, subtle, almost instinctive, toward the hallway. Toward the door. Locked. Untouched. Exactly as it should be. You didn't go in there, did you? He asked casually. Her breath caught, but she masked it with a quiet shake of her head. No. Another pause. This one heavier. He stepped closer again, close enough for her to feel the presence of him without needing to look. Good, he said softly. The word lingered in the air, gentle on the surface, but firm underneath. She forced a small nod. For a moment, everything seemed normal again. Just a husband and wife standing in their kitchen, exchanging quiet morning words. But then he spoke again. Simple, calm, almost effortless. Is there something you want to tell me? And just like that, the air shifted. The question didn't leave the room. It settled into her chest like something alive. Is there something you want to tell me? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For a second, she felt the weight of truth pressing against her throat, begging to be released. But then, just as quickly, it faded, replaced by something stronger. Doubt. I know, she said softly. He watched her for a moment longer, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly he nodded. All right. Just like that, the moment passed. Or at least, it looked like it did. But inside her mind, it had already begun. It hadn't always been like this. There was a time when his voice felt safe, when his words didn't twist and bend until she no longer trusted her own memory. But that time felt distant now, like something she had imagined rather than lived. You're overthinking again. You always make things bigger than they are. That never happened the way you think it did. The phrases echoed in her mind, layered over one another like a constant whisper she couldn't escape. At first, she had argued. She had insisted on what she saw, what she felt. But slowly she stopped, because every time she pushed back, he remained calm, certain, unshaken, and somehow, that made her feel like she was the one losing control. Later that afternoon, she sat alone in the living room, her hands resting in her lap, fingers tightly intertwined. The house felt too quiet again, but not empty. Never empty. Her phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the silence. She flinched. A name flashed on the screen. Sarah. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she answered. Hey, are you okay? Sarah's voice was gentle, but there was something underneath it, concern she was trying not to make obvious. I'm fine, she replied quickly. You don't sound fine. A pause. She glanced toward the hallway, without meaning to. I'm just tired. Sarah exhaled softly. You've been tired 4 months now. Every time I see you, it's like you're somewhere else. Did something happen? No, she said again, but this time it felt weaker. Listen, Sarah continued, more carefully now. You know you can tell me anything, right? Her throat tightened. For a second, she almost did. But then, I said I'm fine. The words came out sharper than she intended. Silence followed. Then Sarah spoke again, quieter this time. Okay, but I don't believe you. The call ended soon after, leaving the room heavier than before. That evening, the whispers returned. Not from him, from inside her own head. What if he's right? What if you're imagining things? What if nothing is wrong, and it's just you? She pressed her palms against her temples, trying to silence the noise. But it only grew louder. Because deep down, she knew something was wrong. She just couldn't prove it. Night fell slowly, wrapping the house in shadows. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone. Her reflection in the dark screen looked unfamiliar, like someone she didn't recognize anymore. Then, with a sudden decision, she unlocked it. Her hands trembled as she opened the recording app. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she pressed record. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. If something happens to me, this is the truth. Her breath shook, and somewhere in the house, something shifted. Morning came again, but this time, the house didn't pretend to be normal. The silence was louder now. He moved through it alone, methodical, composed, as if nothing had changed. The broken glass was gone. The chair stood upright again. Even a faint stain had disappeared, cleaned so carefully it was almost impressive. Almost. Outside, the world continued as usual. Cars passed. Berson. The neighbor glanced over once more, expecting to see her in the kitchen window. She wasn't there. By noon, questions began. But not about her. About him. He didn't show up to work, someone said. That's not like him. Calls went unanswered. Messages unread. The man everyone trusted, reliable, predictable, perfect, had simply vanished. The investigator arrived quietly. No flashing lights. No chows. Just a calm presence stepping into a house that already felt wrong. Detective Ayan Malik didn't rush. He observed. The husband answered the door, composed as always. There must be some mistake, he said, offering a polite smile. I'm right here. Ayan studied him carefully. We received reports you were missing. A small pause, then a soft chuckle. That's strange. Mind if I come in? Another pause, slightly longer this time. Of course. Inside, everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Ayan's eyes moved slowly across the room. The aligned furniture, the spotless surfaces, the absence of anything out of place. But something about it felt staged, like a scene rehearsed after the damage was done. Your wife? Ayan asked casually. She's visiting family, he replied without hesitation. When did she leave? Last night. Ayan nodded, but said nothing, because something didn't sit right. Later, outside, the neighbor spoke first. I didn't see her leave, he admitted. She's always here in the mornings. Ayan's gaze sharpened slightly. Always? Yes. Every single day. Then came Sarah. Her voice wasn't calm like the others. She's not okay, she said firmly. I've been telling her to leave for months. Leave what? Ayan asked. Sarah hesitated. The word lingered. Heavy. Back inside the house, Ayan walked the hallway slowly. One step at a time. Something pulled his attention forward. Not noise. Not movement. Just a feeling. At the end. A door. Closed. Locked. He stopped in front of it, his expression unreadable. Is there a reason this door is locked? He asked. Behind him, the husband's voice remained steady. Just storage. Ayan didn't respond. Instead, he crouched slightly, his eyes catching something near the edge of the frame. Almost invisible. Almost missed. A thin line. Dark. Dried. Running just beneath the door. And suddenly, nothing felt normal anymore. Nothing felt normal anymore. The thin, dried line beneath the door refused to be ignored. It sat there like a quiet confession, something the house had tried and failed to hide. Detective Ayan Malik straightened slowly, his eyes shifting from the floor to the man standing behind him. Open it, he said. The husband didn't move. For the first time, there was a crack, not in his composure, but in the space around him. A hesitation, small but undeniable. It's just storage, he repeated. Ayan held his gaze. Then it shouldn't be a problem. The past rarely stays buried. It lingers in fragments, in records people forget to erase, in voices that were never fully silenced. Later that day, Ayan sat alone, flipping through files that painted a very different picture of the man everyone trusted. There had been others. Not wives, but women. Short relationships that ended quietly. Too quietly. One had filed a complaint years ago. Emotional distress, manipulation. She withdrew it within days. Another had simply disappeared from his life without explanation. No charges. No proof. Just patterns. Carefully hidden beneath charm and control. But he wasn't the only one with secrets. Back in the house, Sarah stood in the living room, her arms crossed tightly as she spoke to Ayan. She called me last night, she said. Something was wrong. I could hear it in her voice. What did she say? Ayan asked. Sarah hesitated. Not much, but she sounded scared, like she had made a decision. What kind of decision? Sarah's eyes shifted toward the hallway. The kind you make when you feel like there's no way out. That night, Ayan returned with a warrant. The house felt colder now, less controlled, like whatever illusion had been carefully built was starting to collapse. The husband stood quietly as they moved past him, no longer offering explanations, no longer smiling. The door stood in front of them again, locked, silent, waiting. Ayan stepped forward, the air thick with something unspoken. Open it, he said again. This time, there was no response. So he didn't wait. The lock broke with a sharp crack. The door creaked open slowly, revealing darkness first, then fragments. Shapes. Stillness. Something that didn't belong. The smell hit next. Faint, but unmistakable. Behind him, someone stepped back. Another voice muttered something under their breath. But Ayan didn't move, because what lay inside didn't match the story anyone had been telling. It wasn't just about control, or fear, or a marriage falling apart. It was something deeper, something neither of them had fully revealed. Because as the truth began to take shape, one thing became disturbingly clear. The victim in this story might not be who they thought it was. The room fell into a silence that felt heavier than anything before it. No one spoke. No one moved. Because the truth, whatever it was, had already begun to surface, and everyone in that house could feel it. Ayan stood still for a long moment before turning away from the open door. We need everything documented, he said quietly. His voice was controlled, but there was a weight behind it now. Sarah stood near the wall, her face pale. Where is she? She whispered. No one answered. Because no one knew. It wasn't until later that they found it. Not hidden well. Just overlooked. The broken phone from a night before. Its screen barely functional, tucked beneath the edge of the bed, as if it had been kicked there in the chaos. Ayan picked it up carefully. Get this checked, he said. Minutes later, they managed to power it on. The screen flickered. Cracked. Damaged. But still alive. There was only one file. An audio recording. They didn't play it immediately. For a second, the room hesitated, as if everyone understood that once they heard it, there would be no going back. Then Ayan pressed play. Static. A faint breath. Then her voice. Shaking. If something happens to me, this is the truth. Sarah covered her mouth. The room closed in. I don't know how to explain this anymore, she continued, her voice breaking. He makes me feel like I'm losing my mind. Like nothing I remember is real. Ayan's eyes shifted slightly, but he said nothing. He says I'm imagining things, that I overreact, that I twist everything, she whispered. And maybe I do. I don't even know anymore. A pause. A breath. Then, but something is wrong. Her voice dropped lower now, filled with fear. There's something in this house, something he won't let me see. Sarah shook her head slowly, tears forming. I knew it. I tried to leave, the voice continued. I packed my things twice, but every time, he convinced me to stay. The recording crackled slightly. Then her tone changed. More urgent. He's not what people think he is. A sudden noise echoed through the audio. A door. Footsteps. Closer. Her breathing quickened. I think he heard me. Then his voice. Faint. Distant. Who are you talking to? Sarah's hand tightened against her lips. I'm not. I was just. Just what? The tension in the room became unbearable. I'm scared, she whispered into the recording. I don't know what he's capable of anymore. Then everything shifted. Voices louder, sharper. You're lying to me. I'm not. Then tell me the truth. I'm telling you the truth. A crash. The sound of something breaking. Her voice crying out. Then suddenly, silence. The recording didn't end immediately. There was movement, struggling, a muffled sound. Then, nothing. Just empty, hollow silence. The audio cut off. No one spoke. Because now, the truth wasn't hidden anymore. And whatever had happened that night could no longer be undone. The silence after the recording felt permanent. No one rushed to speak. No one tried to fill the space with explanations. Because there wasn't a version of the truth that made this easier to understand. It simply existed now, raw, exposed, and impossible to ignore. Ayan stood near the window, looking out at the quiet street. The same street where everything had once seemed ordinary. The same place where nothing had raised alarm until it was too late. Behind him, the house no longer felt controlled. It felt hollow. The investigation moved quickly after that. But clarity didn't come with it. The evidence from the locked room raised more questions than answers. There were signs of struggle, traces that suggested violence, but not in the way anyone had expected. The timeline refused to settle into something clean. Statements were taken. Neighbors repeated what they had seen and what they hadn't. She was always quiet. He was always polite. They seemed normal. That word again. Normal. Sarah's statement was different. She was trying to leave, she said, her voice steady but heavy. You don't understand what he did to her. He made her question everything, even herself. Ayan listened carefully. Do you think she could have hurt him? Sarah hesitated. Then quietly, I think she believed she had no other choice. The husband sat across from them later, his composure no longer flawless, but not broken either. You're building a story, he said calmly, but you don't actually know what happened. Then tell us, Ayan replied. A pause, a long one. Then, I tried to help her. The words felt incomplete, like something important had been left out on purpose. Days passed. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It formed slowly, piece by piece, through contradictions, evidence, and the echoes of that final recording. What happened that night was no longer a single version of events. It was a collision, of fear, of control, of something that had been building for far too long. And in the end, there was no clean answer, no simple victim, no perfect villain, only damage. Ayan returned to the house one last time. It stood empty now, quiet again, but different. The kind of quiet that lingers after something has been taken away permanently. He walked through the rooms slowly, the kitchen, the hallway, the place where everything had once looked untouched, until he reached the door, now open, no longer hiding anything. He stood there for a moment, then turned away, because the truth had already done its job. Outside, the world continued as it always does. People passed by, cars moved, life carried on. But inside that house, nothing would ever be normal again. Because sometimes the most dangerous truths are the ones that look the most ordinary. And sometimes everything looks normal until it isn't.